My name is Lucas, and I hope you're enjoying the conference today. I want to talk to you about Docker extensions, and this talk is from 0 to 1 million installs. So I want to talk to you about the journey that we've been through in extensions this past year. And before I do that, I want to see how many people have used extensions here today. Oh, lots of hands. Awesome. I hope the people that are watching the talk are also used to use extensions or have built one, hopefully. So before I'm going to introduce what extensions are for all those people that don't know what they are. Then I'm going to talk about the journey. Then we'll see briefly how can you start your own extension. If you want to dive deeper, we're going to have some links at the end that you can do. And we'll also see what's next for extension in the next year. So this is me. You can find me as Lucas Bernalte. And in the Docker Slack community, we have an extensions channel that you can join. And you can ask any question that you have about this talk or about extensions in general. So let's dive in. And yeah, what are Docker extensions? So to explain this, I want to go to the beginning with your interactions that you had with Docker. There's a lot of people that use the CLI, but at the beginning, that was the only way to interact with the Docker system. So you could run any Docker command that you want to list your containers, to start them, to delete them, and you needed to remember all these commands by yourself. Then later on, we released Docker Desktop. And as part of Docker Desktop, we have this UI that you can use to see the same, see your containers, see your compose tags, see your images, and interact with those without having to remember all these Docker commands. And this is awesome for all those people who don't want to interact with the CLI directly and prefer to use UI tools. But what we've been doing in these past years is improve the developer experience and improve how developers interact with their local containers so that they can have a better workflow in the day-to-day. So what is the extension's goal? It's actually pretty simple. It's to improve the developer workflow and integrate any third-party tool inside of Docker Desktop. This is a concept that you're already familiar with if you use extensions with other products, like other IDE tools, and so on. So extensions basically let you expand Docker Desktop so that you can create smart and optimized ways to improve your workflow. You can also share that with others by publishing your extension in the marketplace and share with other people and help them. And you have now a blank screen that you need to fill with your own ideas and create your own. So what we see here is the extensions marketplace in Docker Desktop. You can see all the list of extensions there. We have the same list on Docker Hub that you can go and if you explore and filter by extensions. And in this marketplace, what is really cool about it is that you can expose your product to thousands or millions of users that are using Docker Desktop in their day-to-day. So it's a pretty good distribution channel for all those products that are used at the same time that developers use Docker. So we try to empower every team to get more productive through extensions, improve their workflows, reduce some unnecessary time, and improve their productivity. And we're also empowering by having this marketplace to all those products that are used with Docker to have their own extension in here to fill all those gaps that developers have in their day-to-day lives. So how can you get an extension here in the marketplace? We have a publishing process that you can go to. The team reviews every extension that is here in the marketplace, and we release this when we first release extensions. But we also love to hear your feedback. And we release another way of publishing extensions, which is faster. It's not 100% automatic, but the team also does a small check. And it's pretty easy for the publisher to just publish the extensions in the marketplace. It's as easy as open a GitHub issue in a GitHub repo, and that's it. There you go. So I want to dive in this marketplace and see this central part out here. This is some suggestions that we're displaying in the marketplace that we've been working on in these past months. And we think we're going to help a lot of developers to discover new tools that are tailored for their personal use case and then developer pain points. So if we take the EngineX example right there, we can see that it's recommended. But it's recommended only because the user has a container with EngineX running and they haven't interacted with the extension at all. So if the user already has the extension installed or they decided to uninstall it in the past, we won't show that recommendation to that user. So that the user only is recommended content that could be helpful for them, but they haven't interacted yet with. This is something that we're currently working on and will work in the future. We're going to see later in the What's Next section. So you can expect this has more changes in this year. We also have in the marketplace a search and filters that the user can search extensions and filter to. And we introduced categories this year as well. So we have a bunch of categories so that the user can see which extensions are tailored to their specific use case. We have CI/CD, cloud development, container orchestration, databases, Kubernetes, networking, image registry, etc. We have a ton of them. And we're open to add any more categories if the extensions that get into the marketplace don't fit into any of them. And now I want to show how an extension looks like. This is the disk usage extension. This is the most installed extension in the marketplace. And what it does is pretty simple. It shows all the Docker space that is taken in your system in a glance and divided by every area that is taking that space. We show it in just a screen dedicated for that problem that the user can go, see what it is, and then with one click, just reclaim the space. Without this extension, the developer needs to remember all these commands. They don't see the data in a glance, and they have to do all these things together to be able to do the same thing. So this is what we mean when we say improving the workflow. This is a complex thing the developer needs to do, and we have a dedicated UI for that. And just by one click, the developer can solve a simple problem. So it's like adding superpowers to Docker Desktop. So how exactly does this extension improve the workflow? What capabilities does it have under the hood? So with extensions, you can build your own UI inside Docker Desktop. You can use any framework that you want to build that UI, but we highly recommend React. We use React internally at Docker, and we also have some templates already pre-built with React that you can use. And it's also leveraging our Docker Desktop theme that we also provide as part of the Extensions SDK. You can run or stream any command directly from the extension. It's as easy as calling a function from the extension because we provide a TypeScript library that you can use, and you get all the TypeScript perks that we love. And you can also connect to a third-party tool. You can do that by running or streaming that command, but you can also build your custom backend for the extension so that you can directly do a request from the UI to your custom backend, and then from that backend connect to any other tool. And again, it's as easy as calling a TypeScript JavaScript function. And the best thing is the developer community. We don't think this would have been possible if the community doesn't want to help each other and doesn't want to build products that help other developers out there. So yeah, at Docker, we build extensions like the disk usage extension. Sorry, it's not working? Oh, awesome. We build extensions like the disk usage extension that we showed before, but there are also some other partners that build extensions that you can see there. You can recognize the logos, like we have Jafira, Tailscale, Aqua3V, Snyk, Grafana, Digma, Kafka Sonar, Microx, JFrog, Postman, Meshery, Harpoon, Mongo Express, EngineX, and we have also individual contributors like Marcelo or Julian that are responsible for lots of extensions in the marketplace. So publishers for us are also an important part of extensions. We're going to tell you some stories about some publishers in a minute. So all these partners and us, we've been together in this journey for a year. Well, actually a year and a quarter since we released extensions. So in this year, we went from early access to beta to being GA. That was a huge milestone for the team, and we want to keep improving the experience so that our users keep focusing on innovation and improving their local workflows. So in this year, there have been more than 1,200 extensions that have been created. And what does that number mean? This means that developers actually used the SDK, created an extension, installed it, and used it in their Docker Desktop devices. From all those 1,200 extensions, more than 300 are shared with others and are used by groups, not just an individual. So it means that it's helping people out there. And from all of those 300, we have more than 80 extensions now in the marketplace. If you remember, I said before another way of publishing extension was faster. We call it the self-publish process. With this process, more than 40 extensions got published since we released that feature, which is pretty awesome. We listened to that feedback, we released it, and you use it, and we love it. And what I think is great is if we measure the growth year over year that we've had, we have more than 257% year over year growth, which is pretty amazing. This is a huge milestone for the team. And in this year, we've had also 600,000 users that have used at least one extension, which is amazing, again. And all those users have installed more than 1.3 million installs. This talk was, the name was From 0 to 1 million, but this was at the time that the talk was submitted. And now we're at 1.3 only a month after that, and who knows next month what that number is going to be. So we're pretty amazed by all this work and all the community work that has been done with extensions, and we are happy to say that the extension was the fastest product on being adopted inside Docker. So yeah, we share our numbers, but we don't keep all numbers to ourselves. We also share some of these numbers with publishers. The publishers that partner with us with extensions are getting some useful data about how the users are using extensions and having some rates, installs versus uninstalls, and some user retention as well. So the marketplace for publishers is a place to distribute their product, but also a place to understand their users and get feedback. And I want to dive a little bit more into some of those publishers, and I want to tell you some stories. We selected some of the extensions that we have in the marketplace that we think it's interesting for you, and I think they're pretty good success stories. The first one is the EngineX extension. EngineX is one of the most used images, period, in the Docker ecosystem. So having an extension that allows you to interact with one of the most used images is awesome. It helps a lot of people getting introduced to the EngineX world. So for all those developers that are starting to use EngineX, it solves a lot of problems for them. They just use the extension and they get the best of both worlds. But it's also useful to all the most experienced developers that are spending unnecessary time doing some manual work, creating configurations and doing manual restarts, that the extension does it for them. And I saw on Twitter before today that this extension also solves some course issues as well. So that was happy to hear. So yeah, developers don't need to leave Docker Desktop to work with the best of both worlds. They can work with Docker, work with EngineX at the same time. So they don't have to switch contexts, which means more focus time for the developers. And also, having the extensions out there in the marketplace for EngineX was a good place to get feedback and understand their users. In fact, to quote Timo, who created the EngineX extension, we got feedback from users and helped them understand how to use EngineX. We also learned why they're using EngineX on their local machine and what they want to do with it. So the users gave them feedback, and they used it to execute some actions in the extension and iterate the product so that developers are more comfortable with the things that they're doing it. And the other example that I wanted to bring is Docker. Yes, we do build extensions like the disk usage, which is the most installed, but I'm sure you heard, if you saw the keynote about the Docker Labs debug tools, the Docker debug that we're launching. And I highly recommend that you try that feature. But what I want to tell you here today is just the story of how we got there. We wanted to experiment and build a solution to help others debug their containers. So we started this as a closed-source repo on GitHub and tried to talk about this and interact with users so that we can build the best solution out there for them. When we did that and tried to distribute the product, started talking about the product, it turns out nobody used it. So we did all this work for nothing because users were not using the product. So the extensions marketplace came to the rescue. This was built as an extension, and it turns out it was the best distribution channel for the product because it already had the right audience. Thousands of users who were just using Docker Desktop in their day-to-day lives, now they had another extension there in the marketplace who was going to help them. And it was the right audience because it was showing up to people with running containers, which is the target for this product. And also, As part of building a product and measuring success, a product needs to have updates that they can release to the user and have metrics to know what they can improve again. So the marketplace and extensions had that built in out of the box so that we could focus on just building the product and nothing else. And to quote, again, the creator, Johannes, thank you, Johannes, for having everything written down. That was pretty useful for this talk. Developers highly care about this feature. It received a lot of warm feedback, reactions from captains and people inside Docker. There is common agreement that this should be some core Docker thing. So yeah, again, this was a really good example of how this can be a really good distribution channel for a product, but also a place to interact with users and try to understand how they use extension. So yeah, we talked a bit about our numbers. We talked about how it's valuable for developers and for publishers. We've gone through some numbers, some success stories, but how does it feel to develop an extension? Well, what we provide for the developers is what we call the Extensions SDK. This is what we deliver to the public, and it is a set of tools. It consists of 3 things, basically. The Docker extension CLI, which we're going to use in a minute. We're going to use it to initialize an extension, but you can also use it to install, uninstall, turn it into debug mode so you can debug your extension, and so on. There's the Docker Desktop Client. This is the TypeScript library that I was mentioning before. With this library, you can list your containers, list your images, communicate to the Docker Desktop app to navigate to a screen, for example, or just create notifications. Or if you build your own backend for the extension, call the extension backend through your endpoint. And you can also run or stream any command through this library. And we also deliver the Docker Desktop theme, which if you use it, you don't need to worry about styling and just focus on the product. Well, so I know you want to see how this looks like, so let's jump and create the extension from scratch. Let's use these commands, just Docker extension init to create the extension. We're going to enable debug mode so that you can see what the developer experience is like. We're going to enable hard reloading as well, so we're going to do some changes. And we're going to explore what the TypeScript library is about. If you want to dive deeper, again, there are some links at the end of the talk that you can use. So let's jump ahead and do some stuff. All right. Awesome. So let me... So if I do Docker extension init, I'm going to do my extension. Then it's going to ask me for a title. This is a title that you're going to see when you open Docker Desktop and see the extension in the sidebar. And I'm going to call DockerCon extension. A description that you can place. This is going to be shown as the part of the data in the marketplace. I'm going to leave this blank. The vendor, you can also fill it. Again, I'm going to leave this blank. And the image repository that you can also fill with your own hub repository ID. But in this case, I'm going to leave this blank. So when I hit enter, this is going to start creating things for me. It's going to create a folder with all the things necessary to have the extension. It's going to create a Go backend. It's going to create the React app. And it's going to create all the scaffolding for me, install NPM packages, etc. So I already did that before so that we don't have to, well, I already did that, but it's not here. So yeah, if I go again here. Yeah, this is the extension that I built before so that we don't have to wait for that. And this is the code that was generated when I created the extension. I just want to highlight here a couple of things. We have a folder called backend, a folder called UI, that's backend for the extension, and the React tab. This is a plain React application spinned up with Vite. And we have a metadata.json file at the root of this folder, which is needed for us at Docker to be able to fit all the things that the extension needs into the Docker Desktop application. If we go to the backend is pretty simple. It's just an API with a hello endpoint. And if we go to the React tab, the first thing that we see is just a pretty standard React tab with a provider that is the theme that we provide so that you can leverage this. And if we go to the main application, what we see is a bunch of code. So let's see what the extension looks like before jumping into the code. Let me install this, Docker extension install. This is just asking me that the extension can run some binaries, and then, yeah, the extension was installed. So if I go back, I should see here DockerCon extension. And what I have here is a set of just a text and a button that whenever I press it, I'm going to get a response here, which is going to call the hello endpoint before. If I call it, then it says message hello. OK, and this is the code that runs behind the scene. So whenever I click the button, this function is called. And then in this function, we're using this DD client. This Docker desktop client is this TypeScript library that I was talking about. And there's a few things inside that library. So inside the library, what it's doing here is inside the extension, we have a service, which is the Go backend. And we're requesting through a GET request the hello endpoint and just getting the result. And we're setting the response in the text box. So let's explore a bit what we have in this Docker desktop client. And we have a couple of things. We have desktop UI. So with this, we're going to have some methods in here so that we can navigate to certain screens. We can open a dialog inside a Docker desktop, or we can create notifications. But we also have a Docker object. Inside this Docker object, we can list the containers, we can list the images, and we can, through the CLI, do some exec, so that we can do exec ps, and this will execute docker exec ps. And we also have the extensions object, which we're using that in the example, but we can also do host.cli.exec, and with this, we can execute things directly from the host. So let's do some changes in here, and let's change this to use the Docker list containers method and see what happens. So if I save this and I go back, there's nothing happening because I need to build the image again, uninstall the extension or update it to be able to see the changes. But what I can do is, because I'm only changing the UI, I can turn this into, with this command, extension UI, dev UI source, I'm going to tell the extension to get the UI directly from another source, which is going to be localhost 3000. And before I do that, I'm going to make sure that I run the UI with npm run dev. OK, so now we have the UI side running on localhost 3000, and I can enable this. UI source for the extension changed. OK, and if I go back to Docker Desktop, I see a debug chip that says the UI source has been changed to use localhost 3000. Awesome. So what happens when I call backend now? I get another message because we're listing here the containers. We see an array with ID, with a number, names, etc. And we can do some changes in here in real time so that we don't have to install and uninstall and build images every time we do changes to the UI. If we navigate back again, we see again the message hello because we changed it back. So what if I want to debug the UI as well? I can turn this into debug mode by doing docker extension dev debug, and then the name of the extension. So if I go back to Docker Desktop, we can see that now the debug says two things. The UI source has been modified, and then the debug mode is enabled. So this means whenever I click again, we're going to see some developer tools that you can use to debug the UI of the extension. And you can inspect that like as a web, so you can see all the components, place breakpoints, etc. So, yeah, let's jump back again. And after seeing what this development experience looks like, I want to talk about the future. We talk about the present, we talk about the past, and about the future, what's coming next? Well, as every product that we launch, we want to do it because we have seen some feedback from you at some point and interacted with users. So we balance our efforts to make sure that our publishers get what they want and the developers get the needs and expectations are met. So we're going to introduce Docker Scout integration. We know that reliability and security are some things that concern you as developers and publishers, and we want to integrate extensions with Docker Scout to focus on innovation, and let us handle that part, providing you with actionable insights for your software supply chain. We're going to improve the metrics that we have for publishers. We saw earlier a slide with some data that we send to publishers, but it's not the same data that the publishers get when getting the data from the image pools. So for the partners that, the publishers that partner with us, we're going to improve these metrics so they can get the same data points and they can understand better their users. We're going to introduce samples as well. We have an open source repo where we have different samples that you can use to quick start your extension. So we're going to connect what we have with the Docker extension init command to those samples, so you can start directly your extension from there. We're going to implement a private marketplace. This is good for big companies that have a more restricted environment, and they just allow certain images and extensions to be consumed by their developers. So by having a private marketplace, we're helping all these companies and all the developers to distribute their own extensions internally. They don't have to publish it to the public marketplace, but they can still leverage and use all these tools that we provide to improve their workflows. And we're going to improve recommendations. We want to use AI to power all the recommendations that we use in the marketplace so that we deliver the right content to the right developer at the right moment. And more. And what's next for you? So if you're new, you can read more about extensions in these links. You can go to docker.com and see the products, see extensions, or you can read how to build an extension. And if you're pro, you can build your own extension. You can read the SDK docs. You can publish your extensions through our publishing process, and we'd love to hear your feedback. We have 2 different repositories that you can go to. One is the extension ideas, if you have some ideas of extensions that want to be built. And you have the SDK repo, where you can tell us any bug that you see, any feature request that you want, or just contribute to the samples out there. And thank you again to the community that makes this possible. This success wouldn't have happened without your help, and with all the people that are building just for other people. And thank you, everyone that's here today to see this talk. I hope you're enjoying the conference, and see you later. OK, so do you have any questions? Yes? Awesome. Sorry. I don't think I heard you completely, but no worries. I think, well, right now you can use local storage directly from the extension, and it works. It should have the local storage built in. So I'm not sure what your question is. Oh, yes. You mean syncing your state of extensions within your local Docker desktop instances? With the Docker Hub account as well, that we can log in. Yeah. We definitely talked about how we can do some sync, and there have been some experiments internally to see how we can sync things in Docker desktop, and one of them has been how to sync extensions. Yeah. That's awesome to hear that we have the same train of thought. Any more questions? OK. Thank you very much.